Okay. Oh, yep. Okay, I'm going to assume that's going to even out. All right. So yeah, again, these are the topics of the day. Evolution is true. The Earth is spherical. The Bible is inaccurate. Eclipse is not the end of, and then the world. But we can talk about anything. If you have something you want to talk about, just raise your hand. I will let you up. We can talk about God or I don't know, something else. Pretty much anything that experts agree on. You know, vaccines are safe. The age of the universe is old, billions of years. The age of let's see, I gotta make sure that how did I decide to do this? Okay, yeah. The age of the Earth is billions of years old. Trans identity is legitimate. Intersectionality is a good way to look at identity. What are some other things? Some other controversial takes. All right, thank you, Chase. What's up, Chase?
What is happening?
Nothing much.
Cool. I don't know if I got anything controversial right now that I want to talk about, but just to fill some time until somebody else raises their hand, or we get some more folks in here, I could talk about uh something on my mind. Is just that I'm plagued by nightmares, man. I got, some mental illnesses and stuff, and one of the things is that it really gives me these terrible nightmares. And the past 2 nights have not been too bad though, because I've been doing a dream journal, and I started taking a new medication called trazodone to help sleep.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you have nightmares or vivid dreams, or if you have trouble sleeping at all.
I definitely have some trouble sleeping. I don't really have too many nightmares. I do have nightmares, but I guess my guess is you're having night terrors. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Like night sweats, and it sucks. Like wake up all scared, because I just got shot in my dream, or like people are
Mm,
chasing me and the cops are coming in and get me and all this.
I've had being chased dreams before. How long have you had them?
I feel like my whole life.
Oh, okay. So this isn't new for you.
Yeah, I've been used to it, but um
Does it change?
sometimes
Sorry, go ahead.
sometimes I have some good dreams or good parts of the dreams. Like I'm able to jump really high over trees and stuff, and I'm like showing off to my friends down below. I'm like, "Hey guys, look at me," and they're like, "What?" And that's cool. Or I can breathe underwater sometimes, but um, a lot of times it's that like punching in slow motion. You're being attacked and you can't really defend yourself, and you're like, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious about whether it changes based on your beliefs. You said that like you were being chased by kind of like the police, you said, right? Was that one of the
Yeah, that's
things?
one of them. Yeah, and I have a history, a little bit of a criminal history. I'm a convicted felon actually for selling mushrooms like 20 years ago. Uh,
Mm,
and it was just like a handful, a good handful. But the coppers got me in Arizona, and they frown on that type of thing there. So they gave me originally it was a second degree felony, which is the same as manslaughter and like the R word.
yeah.
And like they could have given me 10 years in prison just for selling mushrooms, an ounce of mushrooms to another adult. But I did a plea deal, and they brought it down to a fourth degree felony, and they gave me 3 years probation. So I was able to get out with no jail time. I did 2 weeks of jail, but
Mm.
anyways, that was just one instance of dealing with cops.
Yeah, so did you dream about being
I've
chased by
had a
cops
lot.
before then?
Um, well, that wasn't the only time, so it's hard to say. I've had interactions with law enforcement since I was a teen.
Mm,
Nothing recently. I've been on the straight and narrow um, pretty much for a while.
yeah. Okay. Well, how are things working out so far? Like, have you noticed any difference ever since you started taking the medication versus before?
Well, I mean, the trazodone definitely knocks you out, makes you sleepier and maybe keeps you asleep um, better. Um, but but I've only been taking it for 2 days, so it's hard to say for sure if it's doing anything with the nightmares or if I just got lucky and had a couple nights with no nightmares. But really, like usually it's every night. It's really rough. And but the last 2 nights, like I said, no night sweats, so that's cool. And if I had little bits of a nightmare, it was just that. It wasn't an overwhelming thing that really ruined my night or nothing.
Gotcha. I actually have to.
And also the dream journaling might be helping too, though. What I've been just free form, just writing a Google Doc about, like, I'm having trouble with my dreams, with my nightmares. I'm afraid and uh, stressed out and being attacked and all this. And I
Yeah.
want to get better. I want to be able to lucid dream. I want to be able to jump really high like I like to do, and maybe find some pretty girl in the dream and stuff like this. And and that did actually happen for a minute in one of the other dreams. That was nice. So I think it might be helping. And then when I wake up, I kind of journal what I experienced in my dreams, or like I didn't have serious night terrors last night, so that was good. And we'll hope for the best tonight and stuff like that. So just kind of self affirmations and keeping it written down, basically getting it out of my head and onto paper, and then looking at it real quick, and then moving on.
Gotcha. I do want to remind everybody, if you want to talk about these topics, it is on you to raise your hands. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about different things. So, if you have an opinion on these things, absolutely raise your hand and I will bring you up. Um,
Or
going,
any other topic. Yeah, there's lots of
yeah.
abortion. People could talk about abortion one way or the other. Oh, we got JCC. You want to bring him up?
Yeah. Yeah, we can talk about anything you want. Abortion is there are certain ones that I don't like to talk about, though I will talk about.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
abortion is one of those. I will talk about abortion. Um, I guess I wish you the best, Chase, on this stuff. By the way, as
Thanks.
I always do, I'm always wishing you the best. Um,
Right on.
and I would like to maybe sometime in the future talk about maybe where the anxiety is coming from. I definitely have trouble sleeping, so I think we have that commonality there, and I think it would be interesting to talk about maybe why that is and maybe solutions to it. And I hope the medicine
Cool.
works for you.
Yeah, and I'm in therapy, so that helps as well. But yeah, it's nice chatting with you.
Yep, you too, Chase. And you can feel free to you can go back down to the audience if you want. JCC, how's it going?
Hey, it's a great day, man. How are you?
I'm good. It's a great
I
day. Why
agree
is
with
it?
all your I agree with all the topics, and I love them. So I don't know if you want to expand on them or not.
Yeah, certainly we can. I was just I guess initially interested in why your day was great and anything new or just every day is a great day.
Well, every day I'm alive to walk on the earth is a great day. However, like having a good breakfast, having a good time with my daughter, having a good learning experience, trying to help my teenage daughter be aware of using her time wisely and being aware of the time. It's always a good day when they learn things. So yeah.
Gotcha. So what are some of your thoughts on these topics?
Um yeah, I mean the the rebuttals that I've heard in conversations about all those topics is the reason why I'm on these social media chat apps, right? Because it's kind of these are discussions that you don't necessarily have uh, talking to somebody in the grocery line or talking to somebody at a bar, so to speak. So it's always a good thing to do online because of the I guess the environment, right? That's conducive for this kind of conversation. So I find them interesting.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's why I'm on here too. Um, I guess some other topics that I could kind of spit out would be like, or a thing that often ends up going down a different path is like, is there anything that experts agree on that you know about, or something that you hear experts agree about that you disagree with?
Ooh. When you say experts, like, can we pick a field? Because
Anything in academia. I think the only exception, even though I don't want to create an exception here, though this could be a topic, would be theology. It's not that I distrust theologians. It's that
yeah,
theirs is kind
that's
of.
kind of where I was going.
Oh,
There
okay.
are experts who hold that this is their expertise on the scriptures or the historicity of X is factual. So I always challenge that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
wouldn't agree with those experts. So that's something that I would not agree with.
Yeah, and I usually when I'm listening to theologians, I do many times I agree with their assessments. Like there's two ways to take it. One is that I can like agree with their some of the things that they're saying that are historical, especially when they match up with what historians are saying. That gives me higher confidence that the thing is true, you know? And then everything else is metaphorical. Like if they're telling me metaphorically this is the best way I think to interpret the text based off of history, then I'll probably go, okay, that sounds pretty good to me. Sometimes when they're talking about the translation of a word, I'll do the same thing.
Yeah, in that regard, I would agree. Yes.
Yeah, but when it comes to like yeah, the age of the universe, the age of the earth, sometimes the shape of the earth, it seems like a lot of flat earthers are literal they end up they're often Christian. Am I wrong about that?
Majority of them are. You're right. Yeah, because they're holding to. I think scripture is it kind of could be interpreted in scripture that it is a flat Earth that we're on, and there is a what is it? The dome. The what's the word I'm looking for?
The oh yeah, the firmament, is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, the firmament.
Yeah,
Yes.
the
Thank you.
firmament. Yeah, I was talking to a flat earther one time, and a friend of mine, and one that I've known most of my life, and I was working on their farm with them, and they had said they were trying to convince me that the earth was flat, and they were like, don't you think, like, how do you explain forest fires? And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, doesn't it make sense that like the firmament acts like a lens that causes like forest fires? And I was like, oh, okay, I see how you're making that connection there. But pretty much any area that gets really hot is prime for combustion. So, uh, but it was weird how they were putting the pieces together. Also, not to talk too much trash about them, but they had also been subject to several brain injuries. Um, oh, I'm gonna pull. I am pretty much just gonna pull people up. So let's see how it goes. Trying something different. Pulling up AT. Thanks AT for being here.
Hey, AHA, I don't know, what do I call you? An honest ape?
Yeah, just say honest ape is fine. Get rid of the and. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so the reason I raised my hand is because I've spent quite some time in the Flat Earth channel on politics here,
Gotcha.
and I've been listening to the pros and the cons of each argument, both for and against,
Yeah.
even those that advocate for a concave Earth or something entirely different, right? But let's stick to flat. So I'm not really familiar with this, how it goes, because this is the second time I've been here. Um, do you defend the claim and then I try to attack it, or is it what I think about it and then we just have a talk about it? Is it like a debate format or a
It's
conversation?
not, no, it's not debate format. It is conversation. We can disagree, but the idea is that well, you can view it as a debate. I am going to try to figure out what you think. This is kind of like street epistemology style. I may offer up some challenges, but I'm not here to like push back heavily against what you're saying or like, kind of shame, blame, or any of that stuff. It's
Right. Okay. Yeah. So
yeah.
I'll just give you what I really think. Then I will play devil's advocate because I was gonna take the flat Earth position, but I
Okay.
also do believe in the globe. Then I would like to ask you about something a bit different, if that's okay. That's about
Absolutely.
one of the topics in there before you change the latter one was about systemic racism, if
Yeah.
I recall correctly, right? Yeah. Okay. I actually honestly don't think that there is any systemic racism currently.
Awesome. Okay. All right. And then so there is no systemic racism currently, right? That's the what you would say that you think. Now, do you
Yeah,
do you believe that systemic racism doesn't exist, or do you not believe that systemic racism does exist?
so perhaps it would be good to say I'm not American. I do live in Europe. And so if we're discussing legality or systems, right? Government usually, um, then we can talk about the American one because I'm also familiar with the US. Or we can talk about the European one, specific one. That's up to you. But since it's like
Hmm.
you wrote the thing, maybe you want to hone in on, is it the US? Is it Canada? Where the whole world?
I would assume uh, most what we consider Western countries. America's the one that I'm most familiar with, so that's the one that I'm kind of most versed to
Cool.
speak on.
Yeah, no, that's
And
cool.
yeah, in terms of other countries, it's more speculation on their part. I don't know as many of the stats or any of that stuff. So
Right. Perfect. Um, yeah, I just want to get like the format right before we go in, right? You
sure.
said, do I believe that it exists or that it doesn't exist? Is
Now, do you believe? I'm trying to differentiate. Do you believe that systemic racism doesn't exist, or do you not believe that it does exist? Are you agnostic on it, or do you actively think that it doesn't exist?
well, put it this way, I'm not agnostic. I do take a position on it. It's not in place, but
Okay,
if you want to
gotcha,
talk about the concept of existing, it has existed, so the concept absolutely exists, but currently it's not in place. So therefore, I'd say, yeah, it doesn't exist, if that's fair.
gotcha.
Um, yeah.
That's clear. So how confident are you that this is true?
So like 9.5 out of 10.
Okay, nine and okay, so 95%, 9.5 out of 10. Okay. Um, how long have you believed this to be true?
For at least 2.5, 3 years, I'd say. So just shortly after 2020, perhaps into 2021, when we had both all the events with COVID, and then in sort of relation to that, we had the Floyd incident, we had Rittenhouse trial, we had a lot of Black activists and Black Lives Matter movements. We had a lot of racial debate in the U.S. discussing both Black and white, but also other minorities, such as especially Spanish. Although Asian is included sometimes, it does seem to be outside most conversations, my opinion, or my experience rather.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so short answer is like 2.5 years, three
Okay.
years.
Before that, did you believe in systemic racism, or you were agnostic about it?
Agnostic. Yeah,
You're
agnostic
agnostic about
minded.
it. Okay. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but some of these events started to shape your view, or was it something else? And I'm just inferring that.
Well, yes and no, right? Because I wouldn't say that I just had my opinion based on the event. It was more so that the events themselves, yeah, they demonstrated some issues, but they highlighted sort of the talking points for each side, and it sort of like opened the door for an online discourse and an public discourse on the matters, where you could say that there would be very strong um, sentiment and sort of like reason to demonstrate that there is systemic racism, right? Because now we have these, trials that are very public and on display. So it make all the more sense that now is the time to like hammer down on if there is any. I didn't see it happen, to
Gotcha.
be fair.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. Okay. So these are kind of the events. So it sounds like what happened was these events kind of made the topic relevant in conversation, and you were listening to the different decides. One area is going to be online. Was it also like on TV or maybe friends in person?
Well, again, I'm not American, so most of it was online, but not on TV because I don't watch cable. So most of it was on YouTube,
Hmm.
long format videos, not short format, and articles. I read a lot of articles, and then some of it was through interpersonal conversation like this one online on Discord. Um, and then I would say perhaps like maybe at most 5% was in person in my actual life, because there are people interested in foreign policy and like global politics, but it's limited where I live. So yeah.
Okay. Is there anything that you can think of that would increase your confidence that this claim is true, that it doesn't exist? And note I
Yeah,
said
but
increase, by the way.
yeah, I
Okay.
know.
I only say that because
You're,
some
by the
people
way, you're
start to
doing
answer the
like,
reverse.
yeah, no, and you're doing a perfectly good job of like replicating what I say in a short format, and yeah, you do it justice. So I appreciate that. No,
Yeah.
I know that you don't hold those beliefs, but you mirror them back really well. Yeah, no, I'd say like the way to increase my confidence level would be if I had more knowledge in the legalities and the systems in the US. I have lackluster information about both all the laws in the state law and federal, but also like how lenient some systems can be outside of the law or within the law, both, right? Because you have foreign companies operating, you have foreign systems that the US also engages in, but if it's only domestic, I'm still pretty sure, but there is like this, you know, knowledge that could be increased certainly, and I think that would make me more certain. But you could argue if there is something in there that says otherwise, it would also make me less certain, or
That's what I was gonna
suspect more.
say. So it's true for the reverse as well, right? It might also start to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. Um, is there anything else that you could think of that would increase or decrease your confidence? So it seems like we want to look at the laws and the systems. What do you mean by
Hmm.
systems here? I guess that's a good question. What systems are we
Right.
talking
Right.
about here?
So yeah. So systems is in this conversation, I would say contextually relevant to something that is, of course, lenient with the law, but not defined by law. So it's sort of like contained within the society. So that's how, for instance, large corporations operate? Do they have some form of systemic racism that's not inherently depicted in law or written out, but still they enforce it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's yes, and if it is the case, um, you know, is the government allowing this or they're not aware? And how big does something have to be to be a system, right? Because you could say, well, we have an one road in my neighborhood that's like very racist and we don't allow any buyers of other races. Is that a system that is systemically racist? I mean, I would say no in this context, right? So that's why I said like it's mostly the government, it's mostly legality. It's not small communities and gatherings, although I do have them in mind, but that's not what I talk about.
Okay, so it seems like when we're talking about systems, when you're mostly hearing other people, and I don't think you're wrong. To you, they're talking about government. That's like the big one, right?
Hmm.
You mentioned corporations. Are they included in the list, or are we excluding corporations from this?
Yeah, so that's the trick question, because like, I mean, we can do both really. Like,
Okay.
again, it just complicates it a bit because you could have international organizations that are held um, outside the U.S., but they operate within, and then you could have American companies that only
Yeah,
is
that's a good point.
right. So it's a bit tricky. Perhaps we could say we can include it, but we start with the government and then we transition into that if we still have like disagreements, maybe.
Okay, what about nonprofit organizations?
So that would be like charity, like what else?
Well, just I mean, it's not just charity. It would be like anything that you would volunteer for. Like Street Epistemology is a nonprofit organization that's not exactly a charity. It's just an organization that is interested in like teaching like communication, a communication method.
Yeah, yeah. So that's like I would say no to those because
Mm.
those in my head, right, are, and I might be wrong, but in my head, those, if you say they include stuff like this, could very easily be very small and racist in their nature. And so you could just say, well, we have, say everybody in here turned racist, and we had a system where we banned people that weren't of XYZ race. You would then have systemic racism in the U.S., right? So I would say no, that doesn't count, right? Because
Just to, yeah, okay. So this is interesting to me, and I I believe that you have the best intentions here, by the way. So I don't want you to take this as me thinking you don't have the best intentions, but it does seem like, just based off the conversation. So I'm asking so that hopefully you can clarify that you're defining systemic racism in a way in which it doesn't exist.
well, let me be fair. Like, because I am being honest, right? I'm not
Yes,
treating
yes.
this as a debate, and I'm not throwing like rhetoric or anything. I'm being like down to earth. I would say that when you talk about systemic racism, as we outlined in the beginning, it's mostly the legality, so government and large corporations, right? It, I try to like outline from the get-go that small communal sort of gatherings like a road. You mentioned this Discord. Small gatherings, of course. I mean, you could have a family. A family could be a system in some cases.
Right.
Um, but in this conversation, it's the system of America. It's the government. It's the legality. It's state law, federal law,
Well,
and big
okay.
corporations.
Yeah, so I understand that. I'm gonna try to repeat back some of the things you were saying to hopefully help you understand what I was talking about here. So we started to talk about nonprofit organizations, and it seemed like you were against including nonprofit organizations because if we did, then that would mean systemic racism exists. It seems like you are intentionally defining systemic racism. And again, I'm not saying that you're doing this. I'm just creating the stage here for clarification.
Uh, I think, I mean, you're kind of right. Like, I would grant you that when you mention it, what jumped to mind was you could have nonprofit organizations like, for instance, Black Lives Matter, who by nature is systemically racist, right? There are a lot of people that aren't allowed in, aren't allowed to participate. Not always, but some of the time. So by including that, that would sort of like just end the conversation because, but it would kind of be it would be a
Oh, so
conversation that chase its own tail because the organization revolves around highlighting systemic racism. So if you allow if you allow nonprofit organizations to be included in quote unquote systemic racism, then you could just then it would be everywhere. Like you just create an NGO and like be like, oh yeah, we don't allow this people in. We're a nonprofit, so
so
we
do
have
you,
systemic racism everywhere. I think it's important when we talk about systemic racism that it's something that happens in schools. It's something that happens in housing policy, or it's something that happened in the job market, especially um, public jobs, right? So government jobs.
yeah, that was going to be
And
my. I don't want to derail. I want to go back to some of the things you were saying immediately, and then we can backtrack to some of these
cool,
other things
yes,
because you said that one time you mentioned the conversation ending. Was that is that part of the hesitation? Is you think that if these things are systemic, then it's just kind of like, well, we're kind of on the same page, and the conversation ends. Is that how you imagine
it's
that?
just it's more so that then I would have shifted what I wanted to talk about into something else by
Okay,
including that because and then I think that would end the original want for the conversation because what I wanted to do was discuss like government legality and big court, right? So it's okay that we can talk about something else, but then that would not be like what I had hoped I engaged in initially.
got you. Okay, yeah. So okay. I'm just gonna set a bunch of stuff to the side then. So you mentioned education and you mentioned housing. So we can include these two. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, and police and like
Oh, police.
yeah,
Okay,
well,
that
like
would be the government. Yeah, okay,
right, and in the military as well. I mean, again, I'm not American, but like if you have other systems you would also like to include, sure. Like if they fall under government, like include those as well. I would
gotcha.
just like to learn more about it, right? So it's not. That's why I asked in the beginning: is it like a debate thing where I try to win, or is it just a conversation where we talk and try to like find out?
Gotcha.
it's true or not.
Yeah, well, we can play it a bunch of different ways, and I'm fine with any way. I will say that I guess to this is messaging a bit, but I don't really care. I would usually include a lot of the things that we're talking about, but I do agree with you that it would derail the conversation because that's not where the points of disagreement are between us. So
Hmm.
I think that was good on your part. Okay, so what are some of the main reasons you have for like thinking that systemic racism doesn't exist? If you could kind of state them briefly, we won't take this as in like an extensive argument of what your position is, but just to give us somewhere to go.
Right. I guess like my best argument, quote unquote, or why I hold that stance right now is that I haven't been able to find any in law, so in the quote unquote systems that we're engaging in, I have actually tried to find them because I think it's very interesting if there is like Jim Crow laws going back or like when we had redlining or segregation, we actually had like legal racism, um,
Okay.
oppression, and then I haven't been able to find those today. That's not to say that they don't exist, but that's why I hold it. Also, on top of that, in the public discourse, it seems to be that every time somebody outlines, um, from my experience, when somebody outlines the inequality and the racial unequal systems in play, that they can't really find any place in law. That it's more so kind of like the equal pay, and I don't want to derail, I'm just mentioning something.
Okay.
But it's kind of like when that shows up where yes, there could be an inequality in outcome, but not in opportunity. And I don't really see the opportunity here being sort of infringed on in law. You
Okay.
could then say, okay, there could be prior laws that might have an effect, sure, but we're talking about a current one. And if you want to like talk about like arguing for reparations and you know doing the past wrongs right with more inequality, I don't know. I don't think that holds.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and make an inference here that it's because you're talking about law, and I do want to talk about that. I think that's interesting, but this has got to hold true for corporations. When you hear about corporations being racist, you're not seeing it there. When you hear about education being racist, you're not seeing it there. Housing, police, you're not seeing it in any of these institutions, right?
Hmm.
Okay,
Right.
just to clear some time. Okay,
I want to be clear though. Um, when you say when I say and you repeat back that I don't see them there, it's not that they don't happen or can happen, but it's in the rule set for these institutions and systems. It's not in place. So, for instance, you could say, well, is the U.S. government advocating for murder? No, it's illegal, but you have murderers, right? People can still kill. People can still be racist in these systems, but the system itself doesn't allow for it in its rule set. Is what I'm saying.
okay. All right. So, and I'm sure you've heard of some of these examples, but I just kind of want to bring them up and see what your responses to them, and maybe we could have like a back and forth about it.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, let's see. I want to write down one other thing real quick, so just give me a second. I just can't remember what it was. Let's see. Oh, okay. Well, we'll start off with the first one. Well, actually, sorry, I do have one other question. Then we can go to it, which is like, what would it mean for racism exist for like? I'm going. Let me guess here and just tell me if I'm wrong. In order for racism to exist in the law, for you, it has to be like explicit. Like it has to say, do this to black people, or don't do this to black people, or black people can or can't do this. It can't
Yeah,
be
or any other race. Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
right. So it couldn't be like any situation, but that to you isn't racism. So a situation where a person wrote a law to harm black people and it does in fact harm black people, but they don't bring black people up at all, that isn't racist.
I mean, it's a hypothetical that I want to engage with, but
Yeah.
but I think I need yeah, some specifications, right?
Well,
Because
I'm just wondering
it's
if that would be included in like it is a hypothetical, but if that hypothetical were true, would you consider that racist, or would you say that's still not racist?
uh Yeah, I think I need more information about it before I answer, because I want to answer truthfully. So would it be something like, are you fishing for something like where I say, we have 4 races and 3 of them can get some form of economic support from the state and the 4th cannot. So by omission, we're now being racist to this 4th one, but we're not mentioning, we're just saying we allow 1, 2, and 3
Let
this
me.
economic support.
I do have specific things in mind, but I'm just trying to get a, like, the reason that I'm doing this is because I want to know if it's even worth going down this path. So this is the reason I'm asking. So let me concoct a scenario that is made up. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
So let's say like let's say that there was a law on the books that basically made it so that if you wear do rags, you can be like stopped and frisked on the street and arrested just for wearing do rags. Now, it doesn't say in the law, hey, we're doing this because we want to, inhibit black people from doing this or that thing, or people of color from doing this or that thing. Not only that, but you also know that the person who made the law did it knowing, I'm actually doing this because I want to inhibit black people, but they don't put it in the law. Would you consider that scenario racist?
Hmm. I would say actually, truthfully, no, I wouldn't see
Hmm.
that as racist. I know that there could be suggested to be some connotation behind that more of a certain race use do-rags or sombreros or whatever it might be.
Okay.
But as long as it's not racially bound, so it's not that color of skin, DNA profile, uh, you know, family name tied to a certain race, something like that. If it's a choice, then I say it's okay. And the reason I say that is actually very consistent because where I live, we have a lot of Muslim people, and I love Muslim people. Don't get me wrong. My best friend is Muslim. I have nothing against Muslim people. But we had an issue where a lot of Muslim women had full-on hijabs where you could only see their eyes. And so what happened is an issue occurred where a lot of these women were utilizing a system on the same ID, and that you couldn't really tell if they were using their own ID or the wrong ID if they looked similar in their eyes because that was the only exposed part. And so something came up where when this ID was to be examined, so for traveling or public transport, when you had ticket to your name, so not a non-name ticket, but you could have a subscription. When those were controlled, all people, not just Muslim people, had to show their face. And you can see how there is a disconnect here because, yes, Muslim people are the only people wearing this, you know, fa partial face coverage due to religion. So Christians aren't like culturally doing this, for instance, but they're also the only one with the issue. And there was like a
At
reason
really
why.
quick. Sorry, I'm having trouble seeing the connection between this and the analogy because it seems like we're talking about a situation where and I we can talk about how this might be racist too, but beside the point, we're talking about a situation where someone has come up with rational justification for why they might doing it, why they might be doing it apart from race. Whereas I brought up a scenario where the person explicitly said, "I'm doing this because of their race."
I mean, if they made a public comment as a politician and it's about race, then it's racist, of course. If they
Oh,
didn't make
okay.
that comment, yeah, if they didn't make that comment and you just kind of knew it subconsciously or just
Gotcha.
between the lines, then I don't think it's racist. Yeah, that was like the analogy where I mentioned that because
Okay.
sometimes you don't know what the policy behind it is.
Gotcha.
And for people to suggest that it's just aimlessly targeting somebody,
So you're saying it could
uh,
it could look racist but not actually be racist because the
yes,
justification for okay, that's fine. Okay, so we're on the same
yes,
page there.
yep.
Going back though, before you elaborated on that and we clarified, could you see how some people would hear what you said and have been like, this this person is not like this person is not being fair about this. A scenario was presented where a lawmaker made it because they were racist, and they didn't say anything about race in the law, but we're still not going to call that racist. That made you kind of sound biased.
Not really, because I
Okay.
think, and to be fair, the reason why I say that is because I can name laws that have merits logically, right? Who seem racial at first, right? and you name hypotheticals, and this sounds combative, but this is just how I talk. But you name hypotheticals that seem to be a bit impossible because you're saying a known racist person, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you have information about them being racist.
Yes.
A known racist person places a law just by themselves, which I don't think ever happens in the U.S. I think you have to have, you know, there are multiple parties, also Congress, but a president alone as well couldn't just enforce such a rule. So you'd have to have a lot of chains agreeing that this law should be in place. And you would then need to say, well, all these people are either fooled or all racist, right? So you'd have to display that. And then it would be in place. And then at that
So more
point,
people.
I just think it's so far-fetched that it's hard to engage with because I
Okay.
get what you're saying, but I think I need an example where it happened because a
Let
lot of
me.
people talk about like
We'll
go on.
get to that. I'm about to get that, but I just want to
Okay.
bring up one other thing here because I do think it is significant. If I had brought up, let's say I said there were a lot of like black people who had positions of power in the country, which is to some degree true. Let's say we go to an area of America where most of the politicians are black, which doesn't really exist. But let's say we go to that area, right? And the black people in that area say, we're going to make golfing illegal. If you get caught golfing, right, we are going to put you. We're going to make that illegal, and we're going to do it because we don't really like black people and we or white people, and we know white people like golfing. So if they do this, it's donezo for them. Would you consider this racist?
No, because everybody can golf.
Okay, see that. All right, that's fair then. It seems like you're being consistent, so I applaud you on that. At fair enough. Okay, let's get to the actual examples then, and then this is making me wonder if it's even worth going down this path. But let's just venture down it anyway.
Okay.
People would bring up marijuana laws, right?
Yeah.
They would say this is a strong example of a drug. Alcohol's legal. There have been other there are other things. Tobacco's legal. There are other things that are legal, but for whatever reason, marijuana, which we understand people of color tend to use more, or at least they did at one point. It might be more up in the air now, though I think the numbers are still sort of clear. But regardless, and if you go back to the people who were originally making this, they are making statements about people using these things, and then they make a law with this drug that seems less harmful, and in fact, black people and people of color do end up incarcerated more because of these things. That this is systemic racism, and so you don't. I'm assuming see this as systemic racism. So I guess just speak on it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, you said it right. I mean, you've presented pretty much what I was going to say. As long as an activity is indulged in by everyone or can be on equal footing, then it doesn't really matter to me if it's 99% of one population doing it, or it's a 50-50 split, or if it's a 20-20-20-20-20. It's like 5 races. It does not matter if if an activity is outlawed and you still do it, then that's a choice that you make yourself. You could just as well have another substance or not use that substance. And if you disagree with the law or policy, then you also have every right to move to a different state where it is legal. And if it wasn't at the time, um, elect politicians that could change that law, and you would wait until you did that. And that goes for any activity.
Okay, so
There's
hold
a
on.
lot of
I
that I
I want.
disagree with that I do. Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha, and I understand you. So now I want to bring up some extreme scenarios to see if this is still going to apply. So, if we go to Nazi Germany, right,
Hmm.
and they have these laws that are clearly formed by people who are anti-Semitic, clearly want to get anti-Semitic people off the street, but they don't say anything about Jewish people, you would say that's not an anti-Semitic law.
Yeah. It
Okay.
depends on like if they said everybody who, I don't know.
But really quick, I'm wondering if you can empathize with other people who would hear you say this and say that's kind of strange.
Yes, I can empathize with them too.
Okay.
But I cannot rationalize with them because then they would have to build the bridge between culture and biology, right? To me. And then I would say, okay, now I get it, right?
So you
But
don't.
if
Sorry, go
if
ahead.
you can't build that bridge and you just say, well, it relies entirely on culture, and then some races are just bound to do that culture, I would say, well, Obviously, it's not the case all over the world. I mean,
Okay.
people of the same color, I think, do different things entirely. So that's just not true.
So I think the response here, At, to this would be my response, but I think other people are going to respond a similar way, is that the bridge is the racist. That the racist has made a link between culture and race and is using the culture in the law, knowing that it's going to result in an outcome for a race. That the racist is the one that attaches the culture to the race, and that's the connection.
I don't know if that makes them racist as well. I mean, racist.
The person who's
you have to
connected
be-
culture to race.
Yeah, I mean.
No, but I'm saying
race-
my only point is that is the connection.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
Okay.
but I would say like so does that make them racist? I mean, thinking something and acting on it isn't equal. I mean, I wouldn't say that you.
We're talking about
were
the law,
enacted-
though.
Okay, well, maybe then rephrase what you said, or restate it.
So the scenario is a situation in which someone suspects, or even for good reasons, that there is a link. There is a certain demographic of people who have a certain ethnicity, right, or look a certain way, that behave. So X people. This is the reasonable connection. X people engage in Y behavior. I understand that I can't make X being illegal. So I'm going to make Y illegal, knowing that it will harm X people. That is the connection. That the X and Y there. It's the connection is that the racist person who can make the laws has made a connection between X and Y. And that's ultimately the connection between the two.
Yeah, but they could also be wrong in their like assertion.
They
So
could,
I
but
wouldn't
the
say it's racist.
reasoning.
Yeah, I don't care the reasoning. Like you could have the wrong reasoning and do the right policy also. Like, like don't get me wrong, it goes the other way as well.
So
So as long as something isn't true, just because somebody has a different, I mean, you could think the opposite of that person, right? But that doesn't mean that it's not that it's not racist, right? I don't know. That was kind of word salad. What I'm really trying to say is just because somebody has an intent with the policy they enforce, that doesn't mean that the policy itself is racist. That makes the person perhaps racist, right? But you're discussing systemic racism as in the policy itself. So it doesn't really it's not really about the person who enforces it or suggests it, because also there is this huge chain of systems that are interconnected that has to accept the policy in the first place.
okay.
And then also people have I mean, there would probably be riots if such a policy made it through, and I don't suspect that that policy would be in there for a while. So it's important to me when we talk about systemic racism, are we talking about a hypothetical where a policy could be in place for a brief while that is racist? That is a possibility, yes. But does it exist right now? I would say no. I haven't seen it, and just because an activity is
Yeah.
engaged in more certain races,
I get all
and you
this.
outlaw that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So then another question. Okay. And we can move on from here, but because I do have some other things to bring up. So realistically, in a situation, let's say, and I don't know what race you are because I haven't asked, right? But let's say the people of wherever you're from, wherever you're at right now, they don't like you, okay? And they don't like your family either. They hate the lot of you, okay? Now they understand they can't write into law anything specific about your family because that would not jive with certain discrimination policies that the nation also has. That would be in conflict with it, right?
Right.
Let's say you have a blue house, okay? Let's say that nobody else, and I understand this is a contrived scenario, but it's the underlying thread here that's
Nobody else
important.
has a blue house, now it's illegal to have blue house.
Right.
It's racist. What's it against?
No, would you see it as biased against you and your family?
I don't know. I don't think I would take a stance on it unless somebody said it. I think there would be a good reason to. If the whole political system.
Right, if they said it. I'm saying that they said it. Before they made the law,
I mean, if they said it, of course. I mean, then they said it, right? Then there's like a communication publicly from the politicians. Hey, we will literally do something in legality that oppresses X, right? That is the definition of racist, like based on their race.
But hold on. To be clear here, because we were talking earlier, and I'm hearing different things. I'm not saying you're saying different things, but in one, it seemed like it had to be in the law. I'm talking about a
Policy is not racist. The action is racist. You're saying that they go out and they say, "Hey, we're going to target Asians."
Oh,
That's
okay. Okay, so what you're saying is that systemic racism doesn't exist because it's not in the policy, even though the system may be built by racists.
yeah.
Okay. And so, but can you see how somebody would say both of those things are instruments in race in enacting racism? Can you see that perspective? I'm not asking you if you believe that, because obviously you don't. But could
Yeah,
you
no,
see
I
it?
can absolutely see it, but the
Okay.
problem with it is, I think that's the issue because it's an emotional argument where you link the two without evidence, right?
So then, in what's okay? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just say like as long as you can demonstrate evidently that this policy is directly linked to this race, it's just because the person who put it there might be racist, or if whatever.
Or group of
Um,
people. Yeah. Go ahead.
right, and there is no inherent link to that outlaw thing now and a specific race or races. Then I just see it as an emotional argument that might be right, but you can't demonstrate it, so I can't say you are right. I can just say I'm a skeptic to it, and I don't really take a stance on it. I don't think you're right, but yeah, you'd have to show that.
I do. I have to be honest here, and because I am curious whether obviously this is something we can't know, but it just seems like if is it possible that you could be subject to this? I guess that's a bad question. Is it possible? Is it at all realistic for you to imagine that this happens to you? That you have a government that oppresses a group of people that you're from, and you can start to see how the system is being used to enforce and implement racism.
But I already granted it can happen, absolutely. But
Okay.
I don't think it is happening, is what I'm saying, right? When you say that there is, um, you know, a systemic racism, it means that it's a state of now. I'm aware that it has been before, and it can be again, and also other places in the world. That's why I asked in the beginning where we're talking about other places in the world that might be happening right now. But when you're talking about the state of U.S. law in 2024, it's not systemically racist, is my take. And I haven't seen evidence that it is. There might be racist um, politicians and government officials. In their free time, they maybe say racist stuff. But as long as a policy doesn't have any racial link directly, it's just not racist. You can say that it has racial connotation and it's culture attack on some people, but as long as an activity can be done by all people, I don't really care if it's skewed. The more people do it than another, there's probably a good reason since the whole chain in the system agreed that this is a law that we should have there, right?
Okay.
And I don't think anybody's arguing that racial homogeny in the U.S. has increased, right? Um,
Can I offer a hypothetical? Sorry to jump in.
yeah, of course. And I don't.
Yeah, I want
I
to bring up some
have
other
like
people too, but go ahead, user.
yeah.
Thank you. Also, hi everyone.
Hey.
Just for like a clarification, because the blue house and the marijuana and those kind of metrics are so universal. Can we, for the sake of this argument of systematic racism, can we imagine any law existing or not existing that is based on a metric that is completely tied to an ethnic group? Is there any sort of law that exists or that we can propose where the metric isn't universal? And could that then be a clear example of a systematically racist law?
Yes, of course. You could say, well, slave ownership is now allowed, but only slaves that are black can be allowed, not any other race.
Sorry, if and to clarify even further, can we do that sort of metric without mentioning the ethnicity in the law itself? Is perhaps what I'm searching for. So not say it's illegal for black people to own X or Y, but can we do a metric that's not in the words themselves explicit towards this racial group, but the metric is sort of inherently tied to the ethnic group?
I mean, it would be a guessing game, right? I mean, my best answer to the question would be that if you can find a metric tied to biology, yes. If it's shared only within that group, and if you can't, then no.
Yeah, just really quick. I wanted that was a good question, user, because I have another one too, and I don't want to bogart this thing, so I'm going to allow other people to jump in. I think JCC's up here, so maybe they have something to say about this, and then Reverse Camo. It seemed like you kind of created a scenario there in which slavery wasn't a systemically racist situation because black people weren't the only slaves in America. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can be racist towards multiple races. It doesn't have to be
Well, there were white people. There were white people who were enslaved.
in the legality. Does it say, hey, you can enslave all people, or what do you mean?
It says that anybody can be a slave.
Right. And I don't know. Educate me here. Well, why were black people the majority of slaves then? If there wasn't
Because
like a legal grounding.
they had the least power and they were the easiest to enslave.
Right, but then you answered your own question. Then no, the slave part wasn't racist, but there were other reasons in the legal systems that granted them less power. Right? The
Yeah,
other
I would
racist
just
laws
they,
leading to that.
okay. I would say that they work in tandem with one another, but okay, all right. So
Now then it would be something like maybe you couldn't utilize certain public equipment, or you couldn't get funding for public because of your race, or you couldn't get a job because of your race. You had voting rights, something like that, right? I would say all those things are racist, completely.
well,
Agreed, 100%.
landowners didn't have some of these things still apply to other races, and other races were enslaved, but it just
Yep.
it
Find an example, I'll engage with it. Yeah.
okay, all right. JCC Reverse Camo user, you got something else to say here?
Well, not really. I'm just enjoying it.
Oh, okay.
I'll make a comment though. There was an issue with um, people of certain ethnic backgrounds not afforded the same liberties as those of a certain ethnic background as well. So there was, and there still is, that segregation happening, right?
I think that was
What's
for
that?
you, At.
Okay, I was waiting because so maybe if you wouldn't mind, you don't have to tell me about the prior ones right now, but maybe we can take them after. But you said that there are still some policies in place that are unequal towards certain races. Could you maybe say which ones those are? JC, that was to you.
Um, yeah, maybe there's not actually policies that are in place. However, the result is still, I guess, spilled over into how people conduct themselves.
Gotcha. Okay. So would this be, stop me at any point if I'm misrepresenting what you're saying, but would this be something like there are maybe an imbalance in wealth inequality among certain races? So maybe some races are more poor than others, or some are jailed at a higher rate, something like that? Or are you talking about something else?
Yeah, you're right. We can also even look at it to where, like, say, certain cultural backgrounds walk into an institution and they are already judged based upon their appearance before they even apply for a loan, and then they will not even be considered an applicant for said loan because of the bias that someone has. So that would be something that I would consider a systemic racism going on.
Ah, okay, gotcha. So just to know that we're talking about the same thing, you're saying there still is situations where people are treated differently, sometimes mistreated because of their ethnic background, and we see this in institutions with
Yes,
loans and
yes, you're right.
education.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
could
Yeah.
you maybe like point me to one of those where there's like a policy that is
No,
in alignment
I'm
with
not.
that?
I'm not making a positive claim that there's a policy. However, if I was to research, I'm confident we could find some kind of policy that there is something that would demonstrate this kind of stuff happening. However, it's just based upon experiences within conversations where people are still viewed in that category because of the history that has happened, right? Like in the past, certain people didn't have that ability to get loans, didn't get the ability to own property, didn't get the ability to vote. It's that kind of um, base, the substructure that is spilled over currently, and that is still causing problems today.
Okay, so and I wanna like, man, it's not to be an asshole. It's just I wanna believe what you're saying is true, but it's to you say that this is still happening. We don't see any policy where it says this is allowed, and we not from here at least. It might exist. I'd hope maybe somebody has it. But we don't see any policy where this is the case, and we don't have any systems where we have any evidence that this is the case. This is something we experience, some of us. And
If I can step in here really quick, At, I think that the problem is some of us, and I don't want to. I guess I'll just say myself, and other people that aren't necessarily in this room see an issue where you have somebody who is racist or people who are racist who are influencing the law, who know that they can't, for political reasons, explicitly write race into the law, but are clearly using the law to implement racism, to say that that's not systemic racism makes it to me, it starts to stretch my incredulity. That's the issue.
your thing, can you then point me to such a law?
Marijuana would be a big one.
Okay, so you're saying because an activity is illegal and because a certain number of people in an ethnic group overwhelmingly still want to be illegal conducting that activity, then the policy is racist.
I'm saying people explicitly saying we want to make this law because we understand that culturally people of color are more likely to use it, and that allows us to keep this group down, oppress them, whatever. And then that law gets enacted by a lot of those people, that is a sign that the law is in fact racist, even if it's not in the law.
But if I were to engage with that, because I don't agree with the premise. I think we already talked about it briefly, so I don't want to like take
Which
up too much time
premise?
for people. But the premise that just because a intent with something is racist, that the policy is racist.
Okay.
Even
So,
if I were to engage with that,
mhm.
I would say that you could probably, if I were to guess, find gun laws where the gun ownership is overwhelmingly white, and the restriction on those gun laws would therefore be racist because it's white culture to have those guns. And so any limitation on that
Do
freedom
you,
and therefore penalty of people still doing it
are
would be
you
a penalty against the white people
okay?
who
Are you
still do.
seeing the hypothetical, not the hypothetical? Are you seeing the situation that I just described there as directly analogous to the one that you just described?
Well, I haven't looked at the data for gun ownership, so I said I would imagine. So I don't know if they're completely analogous, but I don't think they're disanalogous.
Well, because my issue is that maybe I missed it. So maybe I need to listen better. But I didn't hear anything about a group of people who are a different race saying we are going to enact these laws specifically because we understand that white people use them more and we want to oppress them.
But you mentioned
Why
something
wasn't that
interesting that
there?
you don't think you can have intra-racism, like intraracial racism?
I do, yes.
Okay, well then that answers that, right?
In what way?
You could totally have white people oppressing other white people
Yeah,
in
but they would
society.
have to say it.
I mean, I don't know what has been said. Like, are you talking historically? We have a I mean,
Uh huh.
marijuana has been illegal for many years, right?
Right. And a lot of the people who have been strong influences in making it legal have expressed racial intentions when it comes to making these laws.
Right. So since I already granted that there has been and still could be something that is racist, um, systemically racist, would you then also grant me that you would have to point out that it is still the case that this policy is being upheld because of racial communicated intent, right? You would have to find that for that to hold.
No, I wouldn't. I
So
believe that the
you would
same.
say that
No,
okay, sorry.
because this is historically we have examples where if something affects white people enough, that law gets changed much quicker. So to me, the racism that is instrumental in creating the law is the same racism that it's not. I'll agree with you. The scales are different, but to me, it's the same racism that prevents it from being overturned. If we create laws and then they're understanding that they were racist, but we fail to overturn those laws, to me, I don't see how that's also, there's not racism in that, especially if it's affecting another group of people. We take the steps to change it.
But I don't know. First of all, I don't agree with that because historic pretext doesn't necessarily explain the existence of the current situation, right? Or even the why. It could, but you haven't demonstrated that. That's just speculation, right? And to say that it's failed, you would then have to bridge that there's a reason why an overwhelming amount of a certain race engages in this activity, right? Biologically, not just, you can't just say it's culture, right? Because it's not a culture to do something legal, right? So you could say, oh, now white people want to start like carrying around a hammer and hammering people, and that's now white culture. No, like that's an illegal activity, and you could say that there maybe is some prehistoric, not prehistoric, some historic pretext. Sorry, English is my second language. Historic pretext, but you would still have to demonstrate that it is the case. You would still have to demonstrate the link to biology or to race, and without just saying culture, you would have to say there is a reason why.
I just really quick, I gotta say that it does seem, and again, this is just what I'm perceiving. I'm not saying this is true, but it does seem that there are some contradictions here. I've created scenarios in which we didn't have to link biology to culture, and you considered it racist. You've done that several times in this conversation.
When would that be?
When I asked you like a situation where we were talking about now I got to think of what the situation was.
That's fair. I'll wait.
You could just use marijuana use.
Well, that's what the point of contention is. So yeah, we don't want to use that one. But a situation.
It'll come up.
Yeah, I feel like I've already asked you. We have a situation where there are a group of people saying we're doing this because of race. Right? We're setting up this law because of race. We're not going to put it in the law. Right?
Talked about Nazi Germany, right? Is that it?
And that would be another one too. It seems like you end up in a situation where.
But I said it's not racist.
Right. I've heard you say that too. I've heard you say both of these things. I've heard you talk about situations where there's a group of people who are racist, and then you end up asking for the examples. So then, why are you asking for the examples of a situation in which a group of people mean to be racist? They're not going to put it in the law, but that's the reason that they're doing it, and it does affect a group of people. And why would you ask for examples of that if that wasn't going to convince you?
I asked for examples when I've agreed to that is racist, because I can't remember that I said that. I think I've
Okay.
continuously said it intent does not matter in my head. It has to be the actuality of the law, right? It has to be in the law.
Yeah, so it has to the race. So
you name something, maybe I can help you out remembering. Maybe this
Yeah,
is what you're
go
thinking
ahead.
about. You can stop me if it isn't. But you named something about slave ownership, and there were
Mhm.
other people than black people, Maybe that's the thing.
It could have been the thing.
Okay, yeah, because I remember saying to, I know this is straight a little bit far off topic, so I'll try to retrace it because I do have to go in like 10 minutes.
Okay.
But I really want to like finish this because it's an interesting conversation. I hope we can end it somewhat on an agreement somewhere. But what I said to that is, if it's all racist, then it's not racist. And then the reply was, well, there was some policy in place that made it so some have the same opportunities in law. So therefore, they were a victim to this law at a much higher rate. And then I said, okay, then these other laws are probably racist, but not the law itself. So that's what I said. I don't think the intent behind the law.
No, JCC. Sorry, I think what JCC saying was right. I apologize, JCC, because you were on the right track. I now remember the conversation. We were talking about how marijuana was created by people doing it for race, right? This is they've said this. We can go find the people who did this, and they did it because of race. It was implemented into law, and your question was, well, don't we need to prove that for today? Why would you ask if we needed to prove that for today if back then it also wasn't racist because they didn't actually put it in the law?
Good question. My
Okay.
answer to that is because I think that the circumstance can change to such an extent that um, the existence and the maintenance and the continuation of the policy no longer is racist. I mean, there could be that there at some point is now an equal amount of people doing it, and we still keep it there, and is now, or that no black people do it, and we still keep it there, because there is maybe utility to keeping marijuana being illegal in some areas, right?
I
And to then suggest after that it's still targeted black people, but even if you hypothetically said there are now no black people engaging in it, I think that's a stretch. That's all I'm saying, right?
okay.
I think, and then second of all, to that, I would say, again, I don't agree that just because an intent is racist, that a policy is racist. And that's what I started off with saying. That's also why, by the way, I said that if something overwhelmingly white, such as guns or golfing, as you mentioned, is banned and the intent is to target white people, as long as all parties engage in this and can engage in this, I don't think it's racist. There might be racist intent, or there definitely is racist intent. It doesn't make the policy racist.
Okay.
Intent doesn't really matter about the
So-
policy and its actuality.
Got you. So part of the issue, another issue that I'm seeing, and maybe this is just more of a conversation for another time, is that there is, on the one hand, the statement that it has to be written in law, that there has to be something about actual race in law. But when I brought up marijuana and I painted an actual scenario that happened, it wasn't to say, you could have just went back to, well, that actually wasn't racist either because it wasn't written in law. It was to talk about, don't we need modern day examples of people who are racist perpetuating that law in order for it to be systemically racist?
Yeah, that was only because I had already explicitly said that the policy has to be racist. So I just thought now would be an add-on to say even
Okay,
if
so
I
in
did do
addition
that,
to.
wouldn't you still substantiate that today? Wouldn't you still have to do that? Like it's just you're right. I probably
I
should have
gotcha.
led by saying
Okay.
off the bat no, but and then maybe you would have said, but could we then like engage with this sub point that if it was or if you did, yeah, that would have been better. You're right.
Okay.
That would have
Okay.
been way better.
Okay,
Because then
gotcha.
we wouldn't have had this. Yeah, you're right.
I understand now. Okay. Yeah, and I still do think, and again, this is, I guess, just conversation for maybe another time. It does seem to create a scenario where it's like, if we understand that the underpinning, again, apart from having rationale for still keeping a law on the books, which I agree can be a thing, that not being a thing, right? It's like if we go to Nazi Germany and it's just like they can be doing something, they're doing it because they want to harm Jewish people. They're doing it because they know that it will harm Jewish people. They've created a law, but they didn't put the word Jewish in it, and that doesn't count as systemically racism. I think to most people is reasonably weird. And it also creates a scenario where, and by the way, this isn't just historically insignificant too, because for the longest time, Nazis were claiming that they weren't biased against Jewish people doing these things. So it allowed them to use the system to implement racism while telling the world, hey, we're not actually being racist. And the world bought it.
I mean, again, I don't know enough about German law to engage. I would need a specific example. I mean, I'm sure.
Just living in certain areas. Living in certain areas could make you put you up for being immediately stopped and frisked. And it's just like, well, it's not. They didn't say that it's because you're Jewish. It's because you're in an area, knowing that Jewish people live in that area.
I don't think that's racist still. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think to most people, they would be like, that causes an issue. That allowed Germany to say we're not actually being racist.
Yeah, but to be fair, if you say most people, that's because the connotation with Nazi Germany is that we killed Jews for racial reasoning, right? And so if you remove that and just say, hey, stop and frisk in certain areas, we have that today, by the way.
So that's kind of a point that people who believe in systemic racism would make, though.
Wait,
Okay.
if you
At
remove
least they're gonna
racism,
be consistent then. But I think like unless, and it's the same with equal pay and it's the same with other issues, that unless you can find a place where a policy says explicitly, you cannot hire these people, or these people should be punished at a higher degree, or they shouldn't have the certain opportunity.
Right. So if you discriminate against them based off of their name, knowing that their name is related, like people who tend to be people of color have that name, that's not racist, because you're not saying, well, don't hire them because they're black. You're saying don't hire them because their name, which is associated often with blackness. That's not racist.
Only depends on Yeah, but that's a good point. This is a gray area, and the reason for that is that name is tied to biology.
I have a
Okay.
question if it's okay between Ape
I
and,
mean, a
and
last name is
AT.
passed on from parents, and their biology is then passed, or were passed on from their parents. So there is like lineage biology in a name. It doesn't all have to be. You could change a name, pick another, but
Gotcha.
there is definitely a demonstrated link in biology. That's why I say it's a gray area, because it is both.
Okay, we can talk about that next time. Sorry, Reverse Cameo, I'll cut you off. But user, go ahead, and because you said you
I
had a
can
question.
Go off now because I've taken up a lot of time.
Hang on, AT.
You can
There's
stay up
some
if you
more
want.
as well.
Okay.
Yeah, if you need to leave in a couple of minutes, fine. But okay, so I think I can solve this because in general, this is a discussion about semantics, right? So if we didn't say that law X is systematically racist, we instead said that law X has systemically racist effects. That would solve the whole problem. I think both AT and Honest Ape could agree that that's a reasonable thing, then, right? At least AT.
I'm fine with that statement. So now I'm
I
interested in
don't
AT.
know, actually, because
Okay. Yeah, that's
a case by case basis. So you'd, I mean, yeah,
That's one of the
I would
points
like
I
to
brought
just
up,
say
too.
yes, but I don't think so, because I think there are also sometimes where something else is causing the effect than the policy, right?
yeah, but he's not. See, that's the it's weird because like I'm being, and user has been specific about the hypotheticals, but it seems like I'm not getting. You're not including the specifics of the hypotheticals into your formula, so you can kind of.
Yeah,
But because
exactly.
it
I
was
can
so
I can
wide,
clarify.
like, what do you mean? Like, sometimes there's a policy in place with a racial intent where the outcome is then also skewed, and just because it doesn't say in the policy, it is the like leading factor to that outcome.
But I mean, in my
What would that even look
hypothetical,
like?
we
What do you
have
mean?
statistics, right?
Right.
So let's say we have the day before the law and the day after the law, and we have a law where the lawmaker is explicitly racist. And by the way, I think I agree generally with you. But if we have a hypothetical where the lawmaker is racist, they make a law based on their racism, and we don't say that the law is systematically racist. For word by word, it's not mentioned any racism in the law. But the day after the law is passed, we can see on the statistics that the law had a systematically racist effect. Would it then be okay to say that this law has a, sorry, not systematically, this law has a systemically racist effect? It's not systemically racist in its written word, but we can see that it has a systemically racist effect at this time and at this place.
What would a racist effect be semantically? What
That
does
we
that mean?
lock
Systemic
up, yeah,
racist.
we lock up way more black people than any other race because of this law for some
No,
reason.
no, I don't think so.
It's still not a
It's still a no.
systemically racist effect.
Yeah, it's still a no.
Oh shit, I thought this was going to be like a clear case where AT would agree with me, but Ape maybe wouldn't. So my next question for Ape would be, why is it important to call something systemically racist like the thing itself rather than to say that the thing has a systemically racist effect? But shit, AT doesn't agree with me. Never mind. Fuck.
Well, to answer it though, it is because it allows you to address issues in the system that extend past issues in the people.
Yeah, I agree. You get more into the social effects and other types of solutions if you don't call it systemically racist. I agree.
Yeah,
But,
and
okay, shit.
yeah, and I think there are advantages too here, where I one of the problems that I have with liberals on this issue is the one, kind of painting. Okay, so racism, right? White people can't not be racist, and also racism is evil. Therefore, white people are racist. Like, no, this is who's going to buy this, right? As opposed to, we all have racial biases, and this is okay as long as we try to stay vigilant about that and accommodate for them. I think is a much, not only more true, it's easier to swallow.
Wait, and honestly, a last question that I have to
Yeah.
what you said we all have racial biases, and I think that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think a racial bias is equal to being racist?
I think if you are, if that is dictating your behavior, then that is the racist component, which I think is very hard to avoid.
You don't think that it could have merit also? That
I-
never happens.
No, I can imagine a situation in which somebody has a racial bias, but they don't act on that racial bias, and in that situation, that's not racism.
I get that. No, I'm
Oh,
asking
okay.
reverse. Maybe I'm being unspecific. I can create a quick hypothetical, and then I probably have to, and somebody else can take over. But say that you had a country where 99% of Asians carried a knife, and they were overwhelmingly knifing and people. And then you were going in a bus, and there were two seats empty. There were one next to an Asian guy and one next to a black guy, right?
Hmm.
Would you say that it would be racist to pick the seat next to the black guy every time? Because there might be 1% that that guy isn't carrying a knife, right? The Asian.
That is actually
Would you say?
a pretty good question, and this I'll give you my answer, which is going to be really controversial, and maybe that's fine.
Okay.
I would say that it is racist, but it's not necessarily immoral.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually where I'm at on that topic.
And
I think that's why
answer?
we disagree then on all these things. It kind of like helps me understand why we see differently on the issue because um, I think that it's okay for there to be an imbalance, and sometimes you can rationalize your own actions to that, and that's not racist. That's just a probability thing, and we do that all the time, by the way, on like genders and stuff. But
Hmm.
that's a personal thing, and then having a policy that directly affects all people 100% of the time doing something, right? I think that's kind of like where we're different because you're kind of the reverse. You say that in personal life, have um, skepticism to the statistics and you should be open-minded. And but it's okay, it's rational for you to think that way, but you should always be open-minded. I think that's a good choice. But in policy, if you see some imbalance, then that could be racist, and not necessarily. I don't need.
No, I
I don't
don't
want to
think
talk about.
that. Yeah. So we'll talk about that a different another time though, because I want to allow JCC and Reverse Camu to say their piece
I
as
just
well.
want
Sorry.
I just
It
want to
was a
throw
good
my
talk.
2 cents in
Yeah.
on the
Thanks, AT.
hypothetical about the bus situation. So with regards to understanding, like, I was hoping he would listen. I want him to hear my answer because I wouldn't call it racist if you don't sit next to the person of the Asian cultural ethnical background because you know they have knives, right? So it's not based upon
You don't know they
the
have knives, but it's well, I guess maybe never mind. I shouldn't have stopped you, JC. You're right. My bad.
in regard to this hypothetical that
Yeah,
they
yeah.
carry more,
You are
right?
right.
So it's based upon what these people carry. So it's about protecting your uh, uh, autonomy, and you don't want to sit next to a possible individual that may have a knife and cause a problem. So you're going to sit next to someone where you have not gathered any information that these people carry knives. So you're going to make a choice based on that. So I don't think it has to do with discrimination upon someone's appearance, i.e., racism, right?
You're right, JC. I have to go, so if I join back since you were like, that's cool. I will answer, but then I have to go. The reason why I did that example is because I said 99%, so you're like almost sure, but you're not sure all the time. There's a 1% chance that you're incorrect, right? And I think most people would rationalize that as being 99% is so certain that it's okay to be racist here and never pick the Asian guy, but pick the black guy as a partner, right? Or sit next to them, whatever. Um, so that was kind of the point. It's that you could have like sometimes it doesn't have to be 99, it could just be 60, 51, whatever, right? But there could be like data where you would be rational in doing something that is exclusive to somebody based on their race or gender. And it could be a rational choice, I'm saying, right? And it could be morally okay, right? Because as you say, you want to defend your own autonomy, and the best way you do that is on data and rationale, I think. But it's unfair to those who aren't carrying a knife. I mean, that guy could be like, oh fuck, nobody ever want to sit next to me, or nobody ever want to like date me because they think I'm gonna like steal their shit or knife them, and that would be totally shit for that dude, like completely. He would never have any options. So again, like, yeah, rationale can lead to shitty situations for the minority. I agree. That's kind of like the point of that, but it was that there is some uncertainty sometimes, and that can be big or small. That makes sense, JC. But I do have to go now.
Thank you, AT. Thank you for the
I get it.
conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah,
you. I get it. I get it.
thank you guys.
Hope to talk to you in the future. Interesting.
Yeah, that was a really good conversation. I sort of would you agree, Ape? I wasn't here in the beginning, but would you agree that AT's sort of claim, the basis of their claim, is that racism only exists in a person's intent? It doesn't exist in other things. Is that like the core of it?
No, it's not. Because one is that the intent doesn't matter when it comes to the law. You can have a person that intends to create a law knowing that it's going to, for the sole purposes, maybe that was an issue in miscommunication, for the sole purposes of harming the race, not for any other real rationale. But the
Yeah.
law isn't necessarily racist because it's not written in the law that it's because of race.
Yeah, sorry. That's exactly what I was saying. Like the racism doesn't exist in a thing other than the person's intent. So the lawmaker can AT would probably agree that the lawmaker is quote unquote racist, simple term, but racism cannot exist in any other place than a person's intent. Like the lawmaker can be racist, but the law can never be racist unless it is written exactly as the person's intent.
That is
So
what they,
racism,
yeah.
yeah.
I think we're using
And
the
what
word intent differently, but yeah, go ahead, user.
Oh, gotcha. I think it's too bad that AT left because it would be interesting to see what the sort of main general issue AT would have with things being called racist that in their mind isn't racist. Like this law is systemically racist. What's the issue? Is it like it creates division, it creates confusion, it lessens the word racist? Like what's the issue we could claim to be that saying something is racist that maybe not is racist? Like, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think, and I don't think this is a straw man. Maybe it is, but one of the position that they're taking, and the position or reason, one of the reasons that a lot of people take this position is because they're seeing situations in which racism is read into things that they're not seeing as racist, and I do think that there's some motivation to push back against that, and sometimes maybe the pushback is so hard that you end up in a position where nothing is really racist or something. Or
Yeah.
but yeah, maybe that's where I start to straw man. Sorry, reverse camo, I didn't go ahead and speak. I know you've been waiting.
Yeah, for a while. I feel like
Yeah, sorry
the
about that.
main bit of confusion. Yeah, I think that the main bit of confusion that is coming from this, it's basically that people are confusing racism itself with systemic racism, because it feels like when AT, you'd ask him whether a law was systemically racist or like that would be your intent, he'd be like, oh, that's not a racist law. And we're not asking if it's a racist law, we're asking if it has systemically racist effects, if you know what I mean. Because in my understanding, with systemic racism, it's the idea that due to laws, due to like different systemic effects, certain races on a statistical level get the short end of the stick, so to say. And I say that that's the core of this systemic racist idea. It's not even that these guys are putting with intent racist laws on the books. It's just as an effect. Like you look at the data, and it turns out that hey, maybe African Americans are getting worse treatment in terms of the law. Maybe they're getting incarcerated more. Maybe they're getting less medical care. Maybe they're earning less on average. And that, like I said, I believe that's the core of what makes something systemically racist. Not if like well, traditional racism, it's like the belief that there's a hierarchy of races and certain races are greater than others, and like an explicitly racist law would reinforce that idea, but a systemically an example of systemic racism would be disparate outcomes between races.
Yeah, and that was my thought process as well. But when I clarified sort of the systemically racist effects by themselves, the fascinating thing with AT's thought process is that they still had a clear no, which was very interesting to hear. But
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Is I thought that's the reason that you were, painting that scenario. And again,
Yeah.
it's a bit weird to me because it's like there are a lot of examples where It's like you have a situation where a group is racist. They've made a law not for the main reason being that they want to oppress a race. That law is enacted. It does in fact oppress a race, but the law isn't racist because it doesn't say anything about race.
I mean, it's almost like it's sort of a protection argument against the law's own rights. Like you can use, well, let's not make too graphic of an example here, but you can use a stick in a racist way. You can, but the stick itself isn't racist, and perhaps even the way you use the stick isn't racist. Like swinging a stick is used in baseball, and it's not a racist activity to swing a piece of wood, but your intent and the effect that you swinging the piece of wood have is racism. But it's sort of it's almost like AT was a defense attorney for laws in an interesting way. And I'm curious about why the separation, seeing how it would probably have very little effect other than semantics and sort of the general idea of what racism perhaps means. It's fascinating why it's important to really separate the minutest of details here. But yeah,
that's a great analogy. I think to finish off that analogy, maybe this is something that we could talk about next time with AT. I'm imagining a scenario in which a person created an instrument for it to be used against a certain group of people, and in fact they've built this device so that it's mostly going to be used. Maybe you can potentially use it for other people, but it's mostly you can only use it, or it can mostly be used for this group of people. But that object is still now not systemically or an instrument of racism unless the word racism, unless like it's written on the bat that you are only supposed to use it. That's the only time it becomes racism. That seems to be.
Yeah. It either needs to be that it can only be used at racism, or it can be, even if it's like 99% used for racism and 1% not. If the situation changes, this sort of thing, this object, this thing is tainted with the branding of it being a racist object. So when society shifts or the situation shifts and it's no longer used for racist properties at all, like 0%, it's still considered a racist thing. And perhaps we lose something by putting a value on something that could in 5 years time be revolutionary or super useful, but we're not going to want to use it because it was historically considered a racist thing. So we would in the long run perhaps lose on the effects of this thing just because it at this time and at this moment is used for racism. It's a fascinating argument.
Yeah, well, and I even see the point there too. That, I mean, he is correct. It's like for instance, a good example would be like the difference between crack and cocaine. It's just like to me there's a clear disparity in the laws that to me cross racial lines and are involved in systemic racism. But now if you ask me like, okay, so you're saying that like crack should be legal? It's like, no, I'm not saying that, right? I'm saying that the way that the laws need to be changed, or the other thing we didn't talk about, which is the execution of the laws need to be changed. But that doesn't mean that they're, obviously there are still reasons to keep crack illegal.
Yeah. Okay, I have an analogy about an object's value imposed on it. Let's say there's a huge war, and there are like tanks in this war, and tanks are objects made for the destruction of property and people. Tanks are just made for war. Sure, it's a machine, sure, it's a vehicle, but it's made for war. And the war is over, and society goes sort of back to normal, and it's an agricultural society, and a group of people living in a village. There's a tank there, and all the old people in the village, they hate this tank because this tank only represents the suffering that was during the war that they experienced. So all the old people hate the tank. Okay, so now their fields, they're going to plant their crops, and the tractor gets destroyed for whatever reason. And the young people say, hey, well, we have a vehicle that works, that can plow our fields, that can help us with our harvest. It's just a vehicle. And the old people say, no, That's an evil vehicle that was made for war. It's a horrible vehicle. But if we don't use it, we're not going to be able to sow our crops, or we're going to starve in a season. So the old people don't want to use it because values have been placed on an object of it being evil. It's that sort of an analogy that the law is considered systemically racist. It's a bad law. It's a horrible law. This law should be abolished. And then society changes where the law still has an effect, but people still want to abolish it because it's an old racist, horrible law, and we lose out on some positive properties just because our mindset is that this thing is racist. Maybe that's the defense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to take that analogy further, but I want to go back to reverse Camus and JCC, give them an opportunity.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just given you an opportunity to speak. Maybe been sitting
Oh,
back.
oh yeah. Yeah, I have to honestly go pretty quickly, but I didn't really have much to say on it. Yeah, I don't know. Like systemic racism, it can be especially hard to see if you are one of the people who isn't experiencing it, because to you it just seems like something regular, and to them they actually can see the disparities.
Yeah.
Like yeah, one of the things I wanted to try and bring up when AT was here, like what people would almost call like reverse systemic racism, like with what is it, affirmative action, where some white people think, oh, that like
Asian American.
minorities or Asian Americans or whatever, or like some minority who traditionally isn't really I don't
I was actually. I came in late.
sorry.
We're just talking about systemic racism.
Oh, okay. I was asking what the original topic was. If it was mainly about the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law.
Both are.
Racism.
We were talking about both.
Okay.
But sorry, go ahead and finish your thought, Reverse Camus.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just say that a certain race that they get a spot in academia and like a white person wanted it and they feel like they can't get it instead. Like a lot of people who are who they'd say they were negatively affected by that, they'd consider that almost a type of systemic racism against them, or like just in general, this DEI, like trying to solve the problem of systemic racism by almost trying to arbitrarily raise minorities up. Like that's considered like let's use the term like reverse systemic racism, so we know what we're talking about. But yeah, I think if people can complain about that happening, like you can easily just complain about these generational wealth gaps and laws that lead to disparities between races.
That was a good question. I'm sorry that you didn't get the opportunity to speak, Reverse Camus. I'll try to be better about that in the future. I was too engaged in the conversation, but that would have been a good question, is whether or not they view oh crap, I forgot what it was called now. You just said it.
Reverse systemic racism.
No, the college admissions
affirmative action.
Yeah, whether or not affirmative action was racist. I'm going to be charitable here and say that they're going to say no, because that would allow them to be consistent, or that would be the consistent answer. But it would be interesting if they said yes.
Yeah, to me, it felt like he was saying that systemic racism can't exist because, by definition, systemic racism is incoherent as a concept because it's not racist. But we were saying that it's the effects of systemic racism. But yeah, next time you got him up on your show, Maybe
I'll
you
bring
could
you up.
ask him that.
Yeah, I'll bring you up and you can
Yeah.
ask it. But what's up,
Oh
Kay?
yeah,
You
even better.
yeah, we'll
Make a
do.
note. Make a note. My suggestion is make a note.
Gotcha. We'll bring it up, Kay. I was trying to come up with counter examples, but Kay, what's up?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to ask how it started and then bring up affirmative action, but reverse already brought it up before, right as I joined. So perfect timing, I guess. Same mind.
I had like evolution and the shape of the earth I had a list of other topics, but this is just the one that came up.
Okay.
But the AT
If
was
you want, we can get into that. If
no, forget that. We're on this now. Let's not change
Okay.
topics. But yeah,
Okay.
AT's argument was that systemic racism doesn't exist. So that was the
Yeah. I don't know when
that
it'll have
was
to
his
go,
premise.
but it'll
I mean,
probably be soon.
gotcha.
they're very clearly people like, was it the tests to disenfranchise black voters in the South? Like there's very clearly
Yeah.
proof of that and stuff. Like, and Nixon, like you brought up Nixon when he says let alone the Southern strategy, but also where they there's documentation where he says
I was gonna bring that up too, yeah.
yeah. I mean, like, I would like to bring a extra, maybe interesting for some people layer, like something that wasn't intended to be racist, but becomes like the effects, right? It's the intent. There's no intent to be racist, but the effects of it. In fact, it's intended to be anti-racist, but the effects are racist. Sort of because, or sexist in some cases. For example, affirmative action. Actually, it is policies, if not laws, based on race versus compare, and that's not always the same thing as inequality. Another thing to add to the affirmative action point is that now it is on average women are more able compared to men to get into higher education. Like the current system of learning in the primary to high school to kindergarten to high school does not uh, like boys, young men and boys are being left behind. So does that mean we need to institute a policy now that favors men? Like it's
Well, to me, this is kind of one of the main
breaking down.
Yeah, I agree with you, but to me, this is why the topic of systemic racism is so important, because in the academic literature, if you read about systemic racism, they're going to bring this up. It's the exact idea that these things can't be addressed on an individual level. That what this would take is a cultural shift, because the issue isn't like, because how do we try to solve this? Well, we tried to solve it through policy. We just made a policy that you had to give a certain group of people a certain number of scholarships or grants, right? You had to let in a certain number of people, when it's like that was a band-aid for a much larger issue, which is what we would call systemic.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to bring up. Yeah.
Right.
May I? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
nope, go ahead.
So have you talked to Will about this? Because I think it was for some of the ones in his group discussion server, like addressing, you can fix the problems without like explicitly saying race, like, because having, how do you say it? You believe like in sort of oppressive societies, right? It's like changing like the people who are at the top of society, right? Who go to the elite schools or just universities in general, but without fundamentally changing the problems of the system. It's, as someone put it to me in that discussion, like it's like having, oh, now we have a equal number of black slave masters in the South, so slavery is okay if it's just proportional to the now like 40, what was it back then, 20% of America was African American. So now we have 20% slave owners are also African American. Like it sure, okay, it appears on the surface, but like at the fundamental level, you're not actually fixing the inequality, and that's why I'm sorry, I'm against affirmative action, because it doesn't, like you said, it's a band-aid, if not a cover, to address the actual underlying major problems.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak too out of turn here, but my biggest issue with it is that it just doesn't seem to work. Like you end up in a situation where
Agreed.
we're offering grants and scholarships to people who don't. A large portion of them still aren't getting through college, which is like, isn't that the goal? Um, but no, yeah, to me, this is like the whole, when we're talking about the inequality of genders, that, and again, I would agree that I think like systemic racism exists and that there's systemic oppression or whatever, not or whatever, but I do think these things exist. But one of the things, like when we're talking about the inequality in the job market, and we talk about the wage gap, it's often brought up that, well, this has to do with career choice, right? And in my mind, it's like that's not addressing the point, because like youth, for some reason, thinking that because it has to do with the choice in career, that makes it not necessarily sexism. There seems to be a gap there for me. And again, the issue to me goes back to the way we address these things in systems like education. Like, what are we giving people the impression that they can really be anything that they want to, obviously within maybe their skill sets or cognitive abilities, right? But really not putting too many limits on that, because I don't think we're doing that. And I think this is a systemic issue where it's just like, to me, this starts to explain a lot of it's like, are you telling women that, are you signaling to women that really they're supposed to be like nurses, or they're supposed to be this or that, as opposed to, no, you can actually, as long as you're willing to put in the work and you have the cognitive abilities, you can do whatever. Like, just do it, right?
Agreed.
That to me is a much better solution to me. And to me, that is really addressing the actual fundamental systems here that I view as issues. But to go back to what User was saying, because I think User started to bring up a really good analogy. You have a situation in which, like, there's a tank, right? And the tank has been used against a group of people. And so now the tank is viewed as bad, even though it might not be being used against a group of people anymore, even though you could use it for other things. I would make that more complicated and say it's actually like you have two or multiple tanks, and some of them are still being used, some of them aren't, and we won't even use the ones that aren't. Or there's a component of the machine that is being used, and we won't just modify the machine to make it usable for us. These are, I think, the issues. So to find common ground and agreement there.
Yeah, and it can. Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, that was it. Go ahead.
It's because we're taking it from a semantic issue to a moral issue in a sense, and it's even more interesting if you have, let's say you have countries and it's like a feudal state, and villages are at war with each other or whatever, and one village has a incredibly problem with racism, and there's a racism police that actively beats down a part of the civilization of that village. Like, it's an inherently 100% racist police force. So it's a negative thing. But then the village gets attacked by another village, and what saves the village is the same racist police force. So it's an instrument made for evil that then serves a good purpose all of a sudden. And so that's sort of the reverse situation. Like, is it now sort of like morally? Yeah, it's an interesting game of morals and semantics. But I think the key part of when AT was still here, I think, did you talk about sort of the end goal of what we're trying to do here? Like, if the end goal is to make society better, are we focusing on semantics when in reality we should just be focusing on the actions of what makes the most good in this situation? So, like, some sort of moral justification.
Yeah, no, I didn't focus on that, and that could have been maybe that would have been more productive. It's just like, okay, whether or not the marijuana law is systemically racist, do you think that we need to dial back on the marijuana restrictions? Do you think marijuana should be Schedule 1 in the US?
Right. Same with cocaine, as you said. Regardless if, like, there's a difference if crack or I'm sorry, I forget the other one. The difference is they try to make between cocaine, and regardless if it's targeted to certain minorities, we should probably still make them equally as illegal.
Yeah, there should be more equality when it comes to those substances.
Right.
Yeah. I think another interesting factor is if AT completely disregards the systemic racial factor and gives it no value, because let's say we have two laws or two opportunities to make laws where they have equal benefit for society, the positive things, they're equally beneficial, but one has a 49% output of quote unquote systemic racism, and the other has 51% output of quote unquote systemic racism. Would AT then feel like, oh, it's better to choose the 49% one, or does he completely disregard the fact that it has quote unquote systemic racism effects? Like, is it still a value based thing where you can make a judgment? Does he still want to lessen the systemic effect, quote unquote racism, or does he just not care about it? I think that would have been interesting.
You're right. That should have been the place to take it next.
Yeah.
I think for what's interesting, I guess it's also like, what's my own issue, with his position, because I don't know that that's not the case, right? And I think that part of it was and the reason that I think the way that I do, I've kind of already answered it in part, but it's the systemic thing. But so it's just like, if you have a situation, again, the situation, to paint it vividly, which I do have to, I know they're not here, but I am going to say it just to be open and speak my own mind. It was interesting to me that the scenario that they ended up painting in their own head excluded things that I and even you, user, had explicitly said about the scenario, which to me was interesting.
Yeah. Hypotheticals and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right, because we're in a situation where there's a group of people. They're all saying that they're creating this law for racist reasons. The law is created by them. It doesn't say anything about race, but they've already said what their intentions is. The effects are such. There's no other conceivable reason that someone could have for having this law. This is the main intention or purpose of this. But that's not racist. The question then becomes, okay, that's not systemically racist. Then what do you do? Right? It's just like, well, let's say, okay, well, obviously we should retract the law, right? Because it's not helping. Why isn't it helping? What is the component? What makes the law bad or wrong? It's just like, well, it's oppressing. It's not helping the things that we want it to, and it's oppressing a group of people. And it's like that. There seems to be a disconnect. Why?
Yeah,
why isn't it working?
Or is it even a bad law in their mind? If, let's say, the law has 2% positive change in America as a whole, but it has 99% negative change in selected communities, is it still a good law for those 2%? Or is it a bad law because it has systemic racist effects? I was surprised that they still thought that systemic racist effects wasn't even a thing. It still wasn't just a systemic racism. It was just some sort of effect that isn't measured in racism or those kind of ideals against people based on whatever biological factors you choose. But yeah, is it still a bad law? Would be an interesting thing as well. Yeah.
Those are good questions to maybe bring up next time. And then the Nazi Germany thing too. It seems like we get in a situation where it's like, you can be Nazi Germany and everything about your laws can be racist, but as long as you don't say Jewish people, we're cool. And then that now allows you to paint a picture in which you're not actually racist.
Yeah.
Using the system racistly.
Exactly. And I think they would probably say that, like, okay, but a similar law exists in this country, and there it doesn't have the same effects based on ethnicity or identity or whatever, so therefore it's not racist. But you can easily, in Nazi Germany, you could easily make a law that only has an effect in a country with a Jewish population. So you can have the same law in a country that doesn't have a Jewish population, and there it wouldn't have the effect, but it still wouldn't be the same benchmark. You can't defend the law based on a country with a completely different subset of people affected by the law. So yeah, we need to have AT back. I feel like it's a really good conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad we debriefed here because it's allowing me to think about what I might say next to better understand them even.
Yeah. And
So-
also, let's say if you have a law that today has systemic issues for certain types of people, what would AT's criticism of that law, without using the word racism, what would their criticism be based on? What kind of words would they use to say that this is a law that it's not great? Like, yeah.
Oh, yes.
What
Yeah,
would
that's what I was
their-
trying to get to earlier that I did not do a good job of explaining. You explained it better there, user. So
Oh,
I'll
thank you.
I'll think about that. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think it's been 2 hours. So Gina, sorry, we are going to end it today, but we will be back next week. So feel free to come by and bring up your topics. Anything anybody else want to say or talk about? I mean, I don't mind saying a little bit more, but I'll kind of leave it up to the room because there's only 3 people in the audience, so we can do like an after show or something in a different room. We all good? Okay. All right. Well, thanks, user. Thanks, Kay, for coming up. And I will see everybody next week. See you in the Street Epistemology server.
Oh,
Cool. Later.
see you there.
Bye.
This is a weekly thing.
Yep. Sundays at 4
In this server? Gotcha.
in this server. Yep. See you then.
See you.